I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say the P word. Phonk. Phonk music. What does that even mean? What is phonk? I asked you guys on YouTube and Twitter to define phonk, and I got a number of different answers. People have asked Reddit and gotten all sorts of different answers. It's such a difficult question to answer that some people feel the need to write an entire novel explaining exactly what it is. I've made quite a few different videos about this particular genre, but if you've been here a while, you probably know that I really haven't gone into detail about what exactly the genre actually is. And that's for good reason. It's a pain in the ass. It would take an entire video to explain, which is why a bunch of people have made entire videos explaining it. But today I'm not just gonna give you my definition of what the genre actually is. I'm gonna give you a taste of what everybody else is saying, because if you looked at some of the responses to my question, you'd think that some of these people were talking about totally different music genres. So why is that? What is it about this genre in particular that makes it so difficult to define? And is it actually possible to come up with a definition that accurately represents the entire genre? Let's find out. So like I said, a bunch of other people have made videos explaining the history of the genre, but I'm just going to give you a very brief history lesson here so that we're on the same page. You want out? So the early influences of the genre goes all the way back to the 1990s in a town called Memphis, Tennessee. You got early influences in the Memphis rap scene such as 3 6 Mafia, which includes people like DJ Paul, Juicy J, obviously, probably the biggest artist to come out of that movement, DJ Spanish Fly, DJ Zerk. Then you had other influences in Houston like DJ Screw. So the East Coast was getting a lot of love, the West Coast was getting a lot of love. Not so much the Dirty South. So this was sort of an underground movement, and a lot of this music was relegated to these cassette tapes. And so it was a very underground movement that was largely spread by word of mouth and these cassette tapes. Fast forward to like the late 2000s, early 2010s, this music actually started to make kind of a resurgence online thanks to people re-uploading these cassette tapes on YouTube. This would lead the rapper Space Ghost Perp to officially coin the term phonk in the early 2010s and kind of usher in this whole new breath of life into this type of music. And then you had producers like DJ Smokey kind of helping to build this community online, this producer community surrounding this sound. For a long time, this genre basically lived on SoundCloud. It really didn't get pushed out to Spotify and all these other DSPs until a little bit later. So it was kind of a cult fan base gradually growing online. You had this whole community of producers after DJ Smokey constantly experimenting and mixing these early influences with other genres. So it wasn't just trap music at this point. There was funk wave, jungle funk, R&B funk, you name it. And there's one other subgenre that I seem to be blanking on, but let's just not talk about that one. But eventually, one of these little funk subgenres escaped the confines of SoundCloud and went astronomically viral on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. Drift funk. Drift funk is this extremely bass boosted version of funk on Adderall that uses cowbells as a melody, usually. It's used a lot in those Sigma grind set edits that I'm sure all of you are familiar with at this point. So it got so popular that eventually all of these new people who were just now discovering the funk genre for the first time through drift funk, they basically thought that that was the entire genre. They thought that funk equals cowbells. And now, even that side of funk has had its own little evolution over the past year or two. Drift funk has started leaning heavily into this more EDM angle. Now it's a lot more housey, a lot more, everything basically sounds like bass boosted house music with cowbells. So that was a very abridged version of where the genre started and where it is now, but you can see that the evolution of the genre is so complex and it's gone into all these different directions that the term phonk can basically apply to everything from gritty trap beats to fast-paced cowbell EDM. So needless to say, when someone asks what is phonk, it's kind of difficult to just give a short, concise answer. It's tough to come up with a definition that accurately captures every little permutation and subgenre that has popped up over the past 10 or 15 years, basically. And like I said before, this is such a common question that there are a bunch of different YouTube videos that try to tackle that very question. If you search for what is phonk on YouTube, you get a bunch of different results. This video essay by APOC Crisis was what I would normally point people to when they would ask me to kind of define the genre. But because it came out so long ago, it doesn't really really touch on those more recent developments with drift funk and TikTok, so it doesn't really give you a holistic understanding of the genre like it used to. And this video by Danny Techaholic, friend of the show, shout out Danny, gives a good synopsis of the genre, but it kind of suffers from the same thing. It does a good job of touching on the origins, but doesn't really touch on the more recent developments with TikTok and drift funk and all that. This video by Matt Makes Music is pretty good overall. I agree with what he says at the end about how there really is something for everybody under the funk umbrella, because it's just so diverse. This, like I said, it's been fused with almost every genre you can think of. So regardless of whatever music you're into, you can probably find at least one funk song that you enjoy. But one thing I don't really agree with in the video is that it essentially reduces the genre to two sides: the smooth, like original side of funk and the newer, shinier version of funk called drift funk. And while it is easiest to picture it in that way, like I said, it is a little bit muddier than that because of how many subgenres have popped up. So while that is a useful way of looking at it, because there is definitely two distinct sides to the genre, there is a lot more nuance at play there. So before I started on this video, I wanted to gauge how you guys would answer this question. So let's take a look at some of those responses. We got someone here who just copied and pasted the definition from the Wikipedia article, which, you know, you guys know how I feel about the funk Wikipedia article by now, I'm sure. Not only did I not get cited, but someone who basically plagiarized my video, they got a Wikipedia credit. We got some people who are calling it, you know, trap music that evolved from Memphis rap, which I would say is fairly accurate. You know, no matter where the genre goes in the future, it is always going to have originated there. In or out? You have to choose one. Coming in or not? So you've got a lot of people who are definitely on the original funk side of things, trying to forget about the newer developments, which, you know, fair enough. It's not for everybody. I found this one interesting. They defined it as music that uses plenty of non-electronic samples. Basically music that's based on sounds and effects that are not electronically made, like money counter, water drops, laughing, etc. Admittedly, when I read that response, this was what I had imagined. If that were funk music, I think it'd probably be a lot easier to define, actually. And then you've got other people who definitely are more so focusing on the newer evolution of funk. People saying that it's the electronic, hypnotic, anxiety-inducing music you hear in war footage. You've got the bells, people putting the bell emoji and the fire emoji. They can't get enough of that ding-ding bass music. Overrated music genre that makes TikTokers be obsessed with it, and some not well-known good music. So you can definitely see where people stand on the issue. Let's check out the Twitter responses. This one's an interesting one. They say it could be described as 90s, sometimes Memphis rap, hip-hop / trap sound that is sometimes mixed with other genres such as jungle, D&B, ambient, and more. And some people feel like it's easier to just define it as a person, a particular artist. Sudier. Sudier is funk.
Oh, you like phonk? Bro, I fuck with phonk, bro.
Someone said Sigma music. Someone said vapor trap. I've heard that one tossed around before. Distorted cowbell trap, Patrick Bateman, Sigma music. So we've really got answers all across the board. A very diverse selection of answers we're working with here. So as you can see, the answers are all across the board. There's no real consensus on what this genre actually is, because it means something different to so many different people, depending on what actually got them into the genre or how they discovered the genre. This is probably in part due to the complicated origins of the genre. You know, there are a lot of people out there who think, oh, Memphis rap, funk music. But Memphis rap is not funk music. It influenced it. It certainly played a role in, you know, Space Ghost Perp discovering that sound and then kind of turning it into his own movement and coining the term funk. But if you hopped in a time machine and went back and told Juicy J and his crew, like, yo, I'm a huge fan of your work, keep pushing the funk, I'm a huge fan of that stuff, they would have no idea what you're talking about. No idea. Another reason I think it's so difficult to define is because of what a lot of people call the bro step effect. If you're familiar with what happened to the dubstep genre back in the 2010s, you're probably familiar with what bro step means. It's essentially the in-your-face, super excessive, loud dubstep that Skrillex was putting out in the early 2010s that took off, essentially redefined what people think of when they hear the word dubstep. You know, most people probably weren't even familiar with that term before Skrillex's influence, and so he had the effect of redefining what dubstep actually means. And like I said, a very similar thing kind of happened in the funk genre with drift funk, where that blew up, and now everybody thinks that drift funk equals funk. Can you go lay down and stop? You're scratching your face on the doorstop. Are you for real? Another reason why this is so complicated, and another reason that I don't think a lot of other people talk about very much, is the fact that phonk music, at least in the original form, had a very large producer audience. So a lot of the people who were listening to and enjoying the music were also people who were actively making music, sometimes making phonk music themselves. It would be very easy for somebody to hear the music, get an idea for a different direction they want to take it in, and then just upload that to SoundCloud, and all of a sudden you've got a new permutation of the phonk genre. You know, the boundaries of the genre have been getting pushed in so many different directions for over 10 years basically at this point, to the point where phonk as a term basically spans damn near every music genre. It's gotten so far that this newer breed of phonk, this house phonk, is probably closer to Russian hard bass than it is to the original influences in Memphis rap, which is the premise of this video by Pooty. You should definitely go check this out. The premise of his video is basically that this new drift phonk evolution of the genre makes the genre so much more difficult to define that we should really consider them separate genres. We shouldn't consider this drift phonk stuff part of phonk because of how detached it is from the original influences. But I don't know if I necessarily agree with that either. I think we should still try to come up with a definition that includes it, because before drift phonk and all that started blowing up on TikTok, it was considered part of the same genre. Like I remember seeing these JDM car edits, you know, pop up on YouTube and thinking, oh, that's cool. Phonk music is getting featured in these car edits that have hundreds of thousands of views. That is my genre getting put on. And I remember even at the time thinking like, oh yeah, this is different subgenre. It's probably a little bit more of a niche subgenre of phonk, one of the more niche subgenres of phonk. So needless to say, I was very surprised when it started going so viral on TikTok. I didn't think it was possible to rinse and repeat that formula so much, but here we are. Now it's basically become its own thing, and if possible, I would like to try and come up with a cohesive definition that does still include that newer side of the genre. So is it possible to come up with a definition that accurately captures not only the original influences, not only the initial movement that started online, but also this newer movement that has kind of sprouted up out of TikTok? Yes, actually, I think so. You can't necessarily call it trap music because obviously not all of it is trap oriented. You can't necessarily say that it's music inspired by Memphis rap because not all phonk music uses Memphis vocals. Not all of them use trap drums or even are related to rap in any way. It's very tough to pin down. So without further ado, after racking my brain for at least 5 to 10 minutes, I want to give you guys the cohesive definition that I think accurately describes the phonk genre. Phonk music is internet music. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but I really like the responses that said that phonk music is probably best defined by its community. And I get that that's like a super vague answer and it sounds like kind of a cop-out, but phonk is a vague genre, so it's impossible to define it with anything other than a very vague definition. If you think about it, the original iteration of phonk, the side of phonk that was kind of ushered in by Space Ghost Perp and then DJ Smokey later on, it was born out of the SoundCloud community. It was really cultivated by this online community of producers trying to push the genre into different directions. And eventually this newer side of phonk, the drift phonk, the house phonk, all of that newer stuff, I think there's a Brazilian phonk now. But yeah, none of that would have happened without TikTok, YouTube Shorts, you know, the internet basically. Like I said, there's two totally different sides to this community, but the one thing that brings them together is that they share and enjoy this music together via the internet. Without the internet, a lot of these people probably would have never gotten to experience Memphis rap as it existed in the 1990s. Without YouTube and people re-uploading these cassette tapes, the original Memphis influences that essentially helped to birth this new internet genre would have been confined to these dusty cassette tapes forever. As a person who produces phonk music, I can say that anyone who has ever spent more than 30 minutes digging for Memphis rap tapes on YouTube has definitely come across one of these channels before. Psychopathic Savage, Soulja from the North, like there are so many people out there who played a direct role in birthing this new genre on the internet, and not a lot of people have talked about that in this discussion. At the end of the day, I don't necessarily think that genres need to be defined. You know, it's not exactly super helpful to define genres, especially when the definition definition is as vague as this one is, but it is helpful when describing it to people who might have just discovered the genre. You know, if somebody comes up to you and says, you know, I love this new phonk music, I've never heard cowbell music before, it might be helpful to tell them, like, you know, you should probably dig around on SoundCloud and look into the other sides of the genre, because I've heard that it is more broad than just cowbells, believe it or not. So yeah, it is kind of a cop-out to say that phonk is just internet music, but without giving a full history lesson, how else are you able to explain to them just how diverse of a genre it is? If you really are trying to come up with more specific definitions for the genre, it has to be one of those dictionary entries with more than one definition. This one would probably have 7 or 8 at least, but if we're trying to come up with one definition that accurately summarizes everything, you kind of just have to sum it all up to the internet created this genre and went with it from there. As a lot of you know, I used to feature a lot of music on this channel. I don't really do that anymore, but people still send me SoundCloud tracks all the time. Well, I'm starting a game show on this channel kind of based around SoundCloud, and I need SoundCloud tracks to feature in it. So it could be your track, it could be somebody else's track, doesn't matter. All you have to do is join my Discord, send a link to the track in this text channel, and it'll have a chance to be featured in the game show. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Peace.
Box on the block is the only thing I'm serving. Scoping out you hoes and you know good bourbon. Box on the block is the only thing I'm serving. Serving, no good bourbon. Box on the block is the only thing I'm serving.
I'm pushing P, honk.